Okay, guys, we may crack on. It's just on 2 o'clock, so I've pressed the record button, and we can say welcome. So, thank you everybody for joining us. We're really pleased that you could make the time to join this Alibaba Cloud webinar. This one is in partnership with LGMS. My name is Andrew Heading. I am the head of field marketing for Australia and New Zealand for Alibaba Cloud, and we have a couple of guests with us today, which I'll introduce in a second. But the topic for today's webinar is really around keeping your business safe through penetration testing. So we're hoping to give you some practical tips, some insight into penetration testing, how it could help your business, and so hopefully, improve the security of your overall organization. The session today, we have about 45 minutes. In a second, I'll introduce CF Fong to you, and we're going to go through some slides from himself. And then we have some Q&A towards the end of the session as well. So if you want to save some questions for the end, then by all means do so using the chat function on Zoom. If you can see the icon down the bottom, you can use that chat function to pass your questions to us, and I can hop back on towards the end of the session and do some Q&A with CF. A very short piece about LGMS. They've been operating since 2005 and really are the leading cybersecurity business expert in Asia. I know CF will give you a bit more of a background, but just wanted to talk to you about how the business has been going. They've been a long-term partner of Alibaba Cloud's. They're on our marketplace, so you can buy their services through our marketplace. I'm really pleased that CF could join us for this session. CF himself is a veteran of the industry. I hope he doesn't mind me calling him a veteran with over 20 years experience in the information security business. So we're really lucky to have him for this session today. I'm pleased he could join us. We also have on the call Jason Xu. Jason is the product manager for Alibaba Cloud in ANZ. We thought it was good for Jason to join us in case there are any questions from yourselves into the Alibaba Cloud side of the business, so he can answer any technical or business questions around there. So without further ado, I'd love to invite CF to say hello, and he can share his screen and talk us through some of the key things around pen test. So welcome, CF.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, Jason, and good morning, everyone, and good afternoon in Australia and NZ. My name is CF, and it's nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Andrew and Jason. So just give me a sec. Let me try to share my screen from here. Yeah. Can you guys see it?
Yes, I can see.
Perfect. So again, good morning, everyone. It is it's an honor to be here. Just let me take a look at this. Right. So today we are going to talk about something quite interesting and quite close to my heart, which is penetration testing. There's a lot of myth and a lot of misunderstanding about what pen test is all about. So hopefully we could take this opportunity to set up some clarifications and give a common understanding of what pen test is all about, and at the same time introduce the new way of how penetration testing is being conducted and how pen test can help to secure an organizations. So a quick little background about myself. I come from a technical background. Basically, I have about 20 years of technical experience in conducting penetration testing, security assessment, and I have a strong passion in digital forensic as well. So, so over the years, I have been very actively pursuing work in the field of digital forensic, computer crime investigation, and that also helps a lot when it comes to penetration testing. In fact, there is a very interesting relationship, when it comes to penetration testing and digital forensic, which I'm going to elaborate a little bit further in the following slides. So a very quick introduction about LGMS. What do? We have established back in 2005. Our core focus is to provide cybersecurity testing, assessment, consultancy, and security advisories to our customers worldwide. So today we have grown to be close to 90 testers organizations. So we are still pretty much focused on our initial idea, which is provide cybersecurity assessment without selling any products in terms of hardware or software. So this gives us the opportunity to stay impartial and stay objective when it comes to providing security consultancy to our customers. And this is also the reason how we have helped customers throughout this region and the rest of the world to improve their information security. So over the years, we have also achieved quite a number of certifications. We are an ISO 27001 certified company. We also are the PCI payment card industry qualified security assessor and proof scanning vendor, meaning that if any organizations out there you would like to obtain the PCI certifications, you can get in touch with us and Alibaba Cloud, and you can find our services on Alibaba, hosted on Alibaba Cloud Marketplace, and that's where you can engage our services through there. And we are also recognized by IDC in their 2019 IoT pen testing report as a key penetration testing partner, among others like Symantec, Intel, and the rest. So LGMS, we are specialized in 5 areas of services. The main category of services, I would say, is testing. So testing consists of almost 80% of our core revenue. And we have been actively providing cybersecurity testing assessment to customers, not just in this region, but different parts of the world as well. And following by that, our subsequently will be digital forensic and computer crime investigation. So we work with mostly financial institutions when it comes to computer crime investigations and investigating digital fraud and conducting, we even testify in court as expert witness. Right, so we have a collaboration started with Alibaba Cloud 2 years back. Today, excuse me, today you can find our services on Alibaba Cloud Marketplace. Basically, we have a very interesting software that is available on Alibaba Cloud where it can help virtually any kind of organizations to prepare, to assess yourself and to prepare yourself to be PCI DSS compliant. And the software is called the PCI Compliance Wizard, and it's currently offered free on the Alibaba Cloud platform. So do remember to check it out. So back to the topic today, penetration testing. So what is penetration testing? Sometimes, when we mention penetration testing, a lot of people may have the different kind of understanding and perception. So in general, penetration testing is also what we also sometimes regard as ethical hacking, by using various kind of methods to infiltrate into an organization and testing the organization to see whether there's any weaknesses in different part of the organization. So the whole idea of doing penetration testing, conducting a penetration testing, is to test the security of an organization. All right. So before we talk about penetration testing, there's also something quite interesting. It is called vulnerability assessment. Right. So sometimes we also get confused between the difference between vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So what is vulnerability assessment, and how is it different than penetration testing? So in general, vulnerability assessment is a kind of exercise that we try to find weaknesses of a network of an organizations. But in the process of finding weaknesses, we do not exploit the weaknesses. We merely going to the surface and looking at what kind of weaknesses exist and report back to the organization. And this is the objective of conducting a vulnerability assessment. So in essence, basically, when we conduct a vulnerability assessment, we do not exploit the weaknesses. For example, assuming that we are doing a vulnerability assessment in a network that contains a data that has several database servers, and in the process of doing discovery, we found out that we have a way to download the entire database from a database server because the database servers are not using a secure password. Right. So this kind of discovery will get reported, and then as the pen tester, as a penetration tester or the security assessor, we will not log into the database to actually download the database content. So, and the vulnerability assessment will just stop at the level of discovery by discovering the weaknesses and then report back to the client. So there are some limitations by using this approach. Basically, sometimes a discount vulnerabilities need to be confirmed. And in order to confirm that, certain form of exploitation need to be conducted. Back to the same examples, if we are doing a vulnerability assessment on a database and we discover that the database could potentially accept the use of a default password. Now, without actually keying in the default password, we will not be able to ascertain whether the database is really vulnerable or not. We will not be able to have a confirm findings that to confirm that the database an outsider can really log on to the database. So that brings us to the next step, which is the exploitation by using the information that we have and further exploit the information. So back to the same example, if we discover that the database is accepting any kind of external users login, we could try to use some simple password that normally we think the organization's personnel would be using, or maybe using a default password by really logging into the database. And if we manage to log in, the next thing we could do is to explore what kind of privileges we have on that particular database. Like for instance, doing a query on some tables, or even dumping the table's content. Now, this is a process of what we call exploitation. And this is the idea of using penetration testing to further confirm the findings that we have obtained from vulnerability assessment. So if you look at it from a logical perspective, right, before we conduct any penetration testing, vulnerability assessment is the foundation, right? So after the vulnerability assessment, so naturally, depending on the risk appetite or risk tolerance of the customers, and some customer will say, okay, that's good enough. I got to know there are some weaknesses in my network, and I want to get I want to start fixing it, and I do not want anyone to to exploit and infiltrate into my network, into my servers. So just stop at that. But some customer who really want to test the resilience or really want to have the true confirmation of the weaknesses in their network or in the system, then they will opt for penetration testing. So these are in general the kind of major differences that we can explain between vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. Now today, penetration testing has evolved tremendously. I mean, if you ask me 20 years ago, the way how we conduct pen tests and today how we are conducting pen tests are very, very different. We are now leveraging on many other techniques that we have learned from, from the bad guys and applying back to our penetration testing. Now, conventionally, doing penetration testing is such a structured process. We still have a lot of training materials that's being taught in universities and being taught in training institutions that talk about how to conduct pen tests. And a lot of these pen testing steps are pretty conventional, pretty standard. Today, what I would like to introduce to everyone is what we call something called intelligence lab pen test. It is a way that can realistically portray how secure, how vulnerable an organization is. And this is the highlight of today's topic, intelligence lab penetration testing. Right. So by the way, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat box. I think Jason and Andrew will be helping us to handle the questions. So far, are we okay with the content? Andrew, are you guys hearing me well?
Yeah, yep, it's all good. Thanks, CF. I think we'll if anyone has questions, there's a Q&A option. If you can ask them in there, we'll address those at the end. Thanks, CF.
Perfect. So let's move on to the next one. So a well-orchestrated penetration testing can help you to find out quite a number of areas. So basically, the main objective of having a penetration testing done within an organization is to identify weaknesses from various aspects of your organizations. So we classify these kind of like different aspects into people, processes, and product. So through penetration testing, we can find out how well our end users, our people are well educated in terms of security awareness. Right, through penetration testing, we can also see if we are really implementing a proper process in protecting our information assets. Are we following certain policies or procedures? Is the way how we conduct business? Is it do we miss out security when we conduct our business, right? And what kind of security controls that we put into a network, are these controls effective? Like for example, we have we have invested into firewalls, we invested into intrusion prevention systems. Are these systems working as intended to be? And through penetration testing, you can get the answers. You get to know whether the security product, security investment that you put in, is it really bringing in values to your organizations? And also through penetration testing, it is a way for organizations nowadays to stay abreast, in terms of knowing more about what is currently happening in the industry. The important thing is cyber threats, hackers evolve at a very lightning speed basis. So in order for us to be really effective and in terms of managing our security, we need to evolve together as well. So one of the way is to conduct penetration testing. A regular pen test will help to ensure that we are being tested against the latest and greatest techniques used by the hackers. So getting ourselves stay ahead of the various cyber threats. So let's talk about the difference between the conventional penetration testing and the intelligence-led pen test, which is the focus of today. So let's take a look at the conventional penetration testing, how conventional pen tests are being conducted. Typically when we are talking about penetration testing, a lot of us still having the concept of doing it in a, in this way, doing it in a sequential manner, meaning that we start by getting the scope of testing from the customer first. So when you want to conduct a pen test, obviously you need to establish a scope. What needs to be tested? Now, some organizations may have a scope like, I want to test my external network to see how effective are our perimeter defense. How effective are our firewalls? Are the firewalls being configured correctly, or are our IPS able to detect any kind of intrusions? So companies will the first thing to do is to define the scope, right? Define the scope and define the test objective. What would you like to be tested? And once the scope has been defined, then the consultants will be starting to perform a recon process. A recon process will basically allow the consulting firm to learn about details about the organizations. For example, if the scope of work is to conduct external security testing, so the consultant will be starting to do a recon work to see, okay, what is the IP block that owns by the organization, what kind of firewall are they using. We try to find this recon through the internet, right, by using some simple DNS query or scanning techniques. Then after the recon has been done with the details, with the IP address that we have obtained through the recon process, then we begin our scanning process. This is the part where vulnerability assessment process takes place. We will start to look for any weaknesses in the devices that is exposed to the internet, and we will look at the versions, look at the banners of the servers, and looking at if the server is a web applications, we'll take a look at what kind of weaknesses potentially exist on the web applications. So we call this a scanning process, right? This is where vulnerability assessment takes place. And after the vulnerability assessment, then we will proceed with the exploitation. Again, this is the part where the customer will decide. If, let's say, if we found out that there's a way for us to log in to the internal web applications by just using a common default username and password, and before logging into the internal applications, we will first get the permission from the customers, and see to what extent can we conduct our penetration on. Once, for example, can we just log in, or can we just log in and start downloading data or even posting data onto their internal web applications? So this kind of collaboration will happen between the consultants and the testing organizations. And finally, once everything is done, a report will be prepared, and recommendation will be put in the report and then share with the customers. And finally, conduct a presentation to the organization so that the organizations can take whatever has been discovered and apply remediation on it. Now, this is a very conventional way of how penetration testing is done. And we're still doing a conventional penetration testing today. But today, conventional penetration testing is no longer sufficient. No longer sufficient to help an organization to discover more in-depth vulnerabilities within their organizations. So by having this limitation, the entire pen test exercise has evolved as well. So evolved to become something what we call the intelligence-led pen test, meaning that the penetration testing will heavily depending on cyber threat intelligence that is relating to the organizations to be tested. So let me have a quick, let me share a quick diagram about intelligence-led pen test. What is this about? So at first glance, it may seem a little bit complicated, but it isn't. So the flow is pretty much the same. The basic differentiation point is that during an intelligence lab pen test, intelligence as the name implies, right? We spend a lot of time in doing this part. We will be doing information intelligence gathering about the organizations we're testing. For example, we will try to find out if these organizations has been infected by malware before or not, right? Has this organization suffered any data leak, prior to the penetration testing exercise? If they have suffered a data leak before, can these leaked data to be found in dark web or not? And if these data could be found in dark web, can we make use of this data and as part of the test cases to apply back to the pen test process or not? So we are doing a lot of cyber threat intelligence gathering about the organizations prior to start with the actual pen testing. Now, there's a reason for that, because when we have gathered sufficient intelligence about the organization, it gives us the insight of how we should approach when we carry out the penetration testing. And this approach will also help to determine how extensive are the details can be discovered from the penetration testing process. So by using intelligence lab pen test, as you can see, we will be constantly reporting back to the organizations what is happening. Instead of waiting for the entire process to finish, then we have a reporting module. But reporting will happen during the entire phases of the penetration testing. And the way how LGMS approach it is that at the same time, we also present to the organizations along the way. Instead of waiting to the end of the exercise, then only we did the presentation. Actually, we do presentation as and when we discover something new, as and when we found out something worth mentioning to the organization, then we would present it to the organization. And we do provide daily report updates to the organization, so you do not have to basically wait for weeks before you can discover, what's wrong with your network, or what's wrong with your service. Basically, we provide daily updates, so you have a very close hand on what is basically what is being conducted during the intelligence lab penetration testing. During this kind of intelligence lab penetration testing, we will also be looking at exploitation. Of course, when we talk about exploitation, we may be taken back a bit, because exploitation may not be necessarily impactful. So that's why we have different types of exploitation, by carrying out direct exploitation to the servers or to the network, or have another way to do exploitation by using indirect way. Now, without going too much in technical, let's go back to let's use a case study. That this is a real case study that we have recently completed with a bank. So let's see the difference, how we can apply the different type of penetration testing to this bank and help to discover the vulnerabilities. So first of all, let's talk about using conventional penetration testing approach to discover vulnerabilities. Right. So we have been given a two standard scope of work by the bank. Right, is to perform external server penetration testing and internal server penetration testing. Basically, the banks would like us, the pen tester, to discover what are the vulnerabilities that we can discover, what are the weaknesses we can discover from outside of their network. Right, they are hosting a web applications. They have several servers that is facing the internet. They would like to know how secure are these servers. Are their firewalls working, blocking all the attacks, or if there's any weaknesses that they didn't know that they would like us to discover. At the same time, they will also like us to discover the internal vulnerabilities of their servers, meaning that we will be simulating as their own employees to do the testing within the network and discover what could possibly missing, or what could possibly be their weakness within their internal network. So these are the two scope of work that they have assigned to us. So the information provided by the bank was just the internal and external IP addresses that belongs to them, and the web application URL that belongs to them, the website that belongs to them. So our job is to discover from external and from internal. So conventionally, this is how it should work. Now, this is a simplified version of the bank's network. This is the internet, right? And this is the firewall, and this is the DMZ. This is where their web server, email server, and DNS servers are hosted, right? And following by that, this is their internal application network, right? So within the firewall, they have their office network, which consists of several smaller networks, which has Active Directory and file servers, and of course end user desktops. right? So this diagram was provided by the bank, and our job is to discover what kind of vulnerabilities can we discover from outside of the network and also from within the network. And they also have a Wi-Fi network. So typically when we look at this diagram, the first thing we do is to perform a DNS query to check, what are the IP addresses belongs to this organization. And from discovering IP addresses, we see what kind of patterns that they are there. Are they having multiple blocks of IP address, or they have just a singular block, or how complex are the network? And then from there, we can start discovering what kind of web applications they are running. Are they using a content management system? Are they using a standard web server? What version of the web server? So we're doing all this kind of discovery work at this stage. So from there, we will also attempt through the web applications to discover whether we can access to the internal network or not by sending queries through the web applications, or sending queries to the other servers that is hosted externally, right? And then following by that, when it comes to internal testing, we will test if we can hijack the Wi-Fi network by using the common Wi-Fi attacks, such as man-in-the-middle attack, using a role access point techniques to see if we can hijack the Wi-Fi connection, and then from here go into their organization, right? And finally, the next step is to bring our laptop into the organizations and work as an employee, and to see if we can discover any weaknesses within their internal network. So typically during stage 4, this is where we conduct a massive vulnerability assessment on their servers, on their internal servers, on their Active Directories and other servers that they have. So from here, from an end user network, we also will try to see if we can access to the application network as well. So this is where the conventional pen test is. It's very structured. It is very sequential. It is very predictable, right? So the benefit to the organization is that the organizations will know where are we coming in, and by when are we conducting, what kind of activities are we conducting. So it's very structured. However, being structured, there's also a kind of drawback, because by conducting the pen test in a very structural, sequential manner, we kind of miss out on many other things. So what are the things that we could have possibly missed out, right? So this is something that I'm going to share shortly. But and this is what we typically can discover during the standard penetration testing approach. So we find out whether there are weaknesses on the DNS servers, or their external servers, or the gateways from external perspective. And internally, we will discover if they have any configuration flaws or any vulnerabilities in their internal servers. This is as pretty much as what we could discover for the organizations during using a standard penetration testing, right? Now, let's move on to talk about the different type of penetration testing, the intelligence-led pen test. Now, I would like to highlight something here. For those who have registered for this webinar, we are going to provide everyone a free cybersecurity threat intelligence report. This threat intelligence report is very interesting. Basically, what we are doing is to gather any intelligence about your organizations from the web and the dark web. So by doing so, we can get to know the organization's digital footprint far more than just conducting a vulnerability assessment. So I'm going to share with you what's inside the report shortly. So by using intelligence-led pen test, the first thing we would do is to do intelligence gathering about the organization first. So this is how we begin the entire process. So when we obtain the intelligence threat intel of the organization, we'll get to see what are the areas that could potentially vulnerable that is being known by the public, right? So the difference between gathering intelligence and doing a penetration testing is that by doing intelligence gathering, we do not perform any scanning on your organizations. We do not need to install any agents into your network. We do not need to install any software into the network in order to gather this intelligence. For example, if you have suffered a data leak before and the data was published, and these are the useful intelligence for the pen tester to make use of later when they want to when they need to log on to your system or log on to a server, they could be using these leaked data, leaked credentials, and try to log in. So by scouting the entire internet and also the dark web, we will gather and consolidate and aggregate these results together, and then from there we get to see what kind of intelligence we can gather, and then subsequently perform our penetration testing from there. So by looking at the cyber threat intelligence of this bank, right, and the historical incident that happened with this bank, we have gathered quite a number of interesting findings about this bank. So these are some of the things that we have found. Right. First of all, we got to know that some of the endpoints within the banks are still using obsolete computer OS. Now, how do we know this? How do we know that some of the computers inside the bank are still using obsolete version of the operating systems or obsolete version of some of the software? Because there are many ways for us to get to know when some organization is using obsolete software. For example, if we have a website and if you have obsolete software or obsolete browser that is within your organization and try to access our website, and by accessing our website, we get to know what version of browser are you using, your organization's computers are using, and from there, that's how we get to know that, hey, by the way, you're still using an obsolete web browser, and this also gives us the advantage to plan our next attack from there onwards. Because if you're using a vulnerable browser, we could have create a form of attack that specifically targeting on this vulnerable browser, and also at the same time, if we found out that some of your corporate data you have suffered a data leak before, and some of the user credentials and password are still being published in the dark web, and we could also try to use this credential in hope that the user haven't changed their password to use these credentials to log on to your corporate systems. So by looking at this cyber threat intelligence report from this bank, we realized that this bank has suffered data leak before, and then many of their web browsers are still obsolete. Many of their systems are still using obsolete OS, operating system version, and then that gives us an idea. What should we be? How should we approach when we have all this intelligence? So we were thinking whether we should develop our own friendly malware by just targeting on these vulnerable computers, or should we create a website that force the browser to download something that we created, and then from there install backdoors into the organization? Or should we just try to log in using the leaked username and password? So this kind of intelligence report is giving the hackers a lot of useful information for the hackers to fine-tune their approach and fine-tune their attack techniques. Now, at the same time, because LGMS, we're also very active in conducting computer crime investigation and digital forensic. And these also give us an edge by getting to know what are the latest techniques the hackers are using, and how hackers using different tools or techniques to infiltrate into the organizations. Now, by doing reverse engineering, sometimes by doing reverse engineering of malwares, we also get to discover some newer techniques that hackers are using. And what we can do is to apply this newly learned technique into our penetration testing, and that's how the penetration testing become more realistic and more effective when it's being tested on an organizations. So that's why I say that there's a close relationship between digital forensic and penetration testing, because digital forensic is the way how we have also get a chance to see how hackers are using different ways to hack into organizations. So by adapting the latest way how hackers used to hack into organizations, we can also replay the scenario and give the organizations a very realistic view of how hacker could have infiltrated into the organization. So back to the same network, if we are using an intelligence lab pen test, the approach will be vastly different, right? Because from previous example, from the intelligence report, that we have discovered that the end users of the bank, they have suffered a data leak before. They have also suffered a malware infection before. They have also, they are still running obsolete operating systems in their servers and also in their end users' PC. So the way how we perform the test will be very different. Now, first of all, when we do an intelligence lab pen test, we'll get the cyber threat intelligence report first, get this report generated. And from the report, we get to learn a lot of things about this organization. And first thing we would do is to try the Wi-Fi access point, right? Because we have the leaked credentials, leaked username and password, we will want to try whether this leaked username and password can be applied through the Wi-Fi network. If we can access from the Wi-Fi network using this leaked credential, that gives us a direct access into their end users environment already. So it's actually shortened our time to infiltrate into the organizations. At the same time, by doing a Wi-Fi assessment, Wi-Fi security testing, we can also test with various Wi-Fi techniques by, for example, doing man-in-the-middle attack, doing phishing on the end users who are already connected to the Wi-Fi access point, right? Redirecting them to a fake website and entice them to log in. There are various attacks that we can carry out. And then following by that, we still follow the standard procedure by doing a vulnerability discovery, vulnerability scanning on their servers. But this time when we perform the vulnerability assessment on the servers, we will be using the credentials that we found from the previous intelligence report, and to see whether we can gain further access from using the intelligence that we have discovered. If we are lucky, then we can get into the backend network from the web applications, right? At the same time, we because we know that the organizations has suffered data leak before. The organizations has been infected by malware before. So our assumption would be that the end users within organizations, probably they may not have a very high alert. And then when it comes to phishing emails, so we would be also trying to send out phishing emails to the end users within organizations. Now, at the same time, we would design and craft a specially designed malware to send into the network. Of course, when I say malware, please don't be alerted. The malware didn't really try to cause damage to the organizations. What we are merely trying to do is to create a piece of software attached together with an email that opens up a backdoor back to us from external. So the next step is when we send a phishing email to the end users within the organizations, in hope that the end users click on the malware or click on the link that we have specially crafted for them and get our backdoor installed into the network. So true enough, the end users install the backdoors, and then that's how we got get into their PCs. And from a PC, we initiate connection out from within the network to our command and control servers. So in this case, when the user click on the malware or click on our link, we virtually bypass all the firewalls and then connecting back to our command and control center. So this is how typically how real life hackers would want to infiltrate into organizations. Because today it's no longer make any sense for hackers to try to break our firewalls, because firewalls are designed so well and intrusion prevention systems are functioning so effectively. It's virtually impossible for hackers to bypass these parameter controls. So the best way for hackers to infiltrate into organizations today, I mean the top choices for hackers, is to send phishing emails attached together with malware. So, and in fact, indeed, we did the same thing and attach malware. And innocent end users typically will look at the attachment and click on the attachment, open the attachment, and get themselves infected with backdoors or malware. So this is how we get into the organizations. So once the backdoor installed on the end user's network, and this is how we go into the PC, and from the PC, we will be starting to scan whatever is in asset that is within the network. So if the same network the PC is residing, having hosting a file server or Active Directory, this is where we will be targeting on these servers. So that's why effective network design is very critical. If you have different end users network within organizations, a proper segmentation will help to protect your cyber exposure. That's why doing this kind of penetration testing can tell us a lot about the organizations. If the organization to tell us if the organization has proper network segmentation, if the organization has done their end user awareness training, how alert are end users. It tells us a lot about the organizations when we carry out this type of testing. So subsequently, Attackers typically will also target Active Directory. Active Directory is like a crown jewel within your internet network, which contains all the username and credentials of your entire network. So as an attacker, our target after the file server would be the Active Directory to see if we can get a domain controller account within the Active Directory. And from gaining the access to your Active Directory, right, that's how we spread malware to different parts of the network, and also taking over the administrators. And by taking over the administrator, we can start cleaning our track and doing a lot of cleanup to conceal our tracks. Of course, then we talk about lateral movement. From if we can get in from, if we can install a backdoor within the organization, then we can also do a lateral movement, moving from this network to other network. Now, one of the things that we discover as a penetration tester is that a lot of time we design our network to prevent intruders coming from external. You know, we design the way how we design security is we design security such a way that it's blocking external access, external incoming traffic. But we never thought of the situation or the scenario where the hackers are already within your network or within your environment. How do we contain the hackers if the hackers are already inside our environment? Does our access control design in such a way that it prevents internal insiders to do a lateral movement? Do we have a proper internal access control? And this is a part where we see most organizations fail to design effective access control model. So from doing an intelligence lab pen test, basically we can get a lot of insight about the organizations compared with the conventional testing, right? So we would be sharing these slides. Andrew, are we able to share these slides later so everyone can have a more detailed look into the content?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that post the session. No problem.
Yep. So don't have to go through all the text and bore everyone to death. So these are difference in, if you take a look at this, the standard pen test and intelligence lab pen test actually, it gives us a very intelligence lab pen test gives us a very in-depth understanding of the entire organization, and this is exactly what an organization need to have nowadays, because we can no longer satisfy with the conventional findings. You know, from doing a conventional pen test, we need insights. We need realistic acid tests to test how effective our security controls, whether our users are well trained and well alert, cautious about the emails coming into the network, and this is the way how organizations get to discover real attacks, how resilient are they against cyber threats today. So these are like comparison between a conventional standard pen testing and intelligence lab pen testing. Intelligence lab pen testing gives us something more extra, about what could we discover by looking at different angles of the organizations. So in summary, hackers and the technologies evolve. So should our cyber defense strategies. We can no longer rely on the conventional way and to think to operate. So we need to think about being able to predict, being able to know what are our digital footprint out there, right? So how do we know that? By using a cyber threat intelligence reporting. Get in touch with us. We'll be able to share the cyber threat intelligence, your digital footprint, by sending you an executive summary report. So we, for anyone who registered for the seminar today, for the webinar today, so you'll be getting your cyber threat intel report. Do get in touch with us. And also another way is to also make use of malware to automate. Hackers today also make use of malware to automate internal recon and attacks. Malwares today, what we have, again, back to our computer crime investigation, digital forensic experience, we have seen malware today that operate in a fileless mechanism, meaning that the malware itself is not really a file. The malware runs in the memory. The malware will be able to establish persistencies even after the reboot. We have also seen malware is intelligent enough to detect what kind of antivirus is running on the end user's PC or servers, and then install and then inject itself to uninstall the antivirus and uninstall the endpoint protection system, endpoint protection software on the servers. So hackers are getting more and more intelligence. So does malware, and hackers today also likes to prey on weak endpoints. Endpoint is always the priority for hackers today. So we no longer, as hackers no longer just looking at servers. Hackers no longer just interested into network devices, but hackers are interested into endpoint devices, including our IoT devices, devices that are not exactly used by end users, but equally important within organizations, such as your CCTV, your smart building control system, your environmental control systems, the IoT devices. So in conclusion, what we would like to say is that pen test is no longer a luxury. It is a mandatory process, because hackers today, they don't choose their target. Anyone with an IP address is virtually a target for the hackers. So today, not just a mandatory process. In fact, for many regulators, penetration testing is also part of the regulatory requirements. For example, if any one of our audience would like to comply to PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, or you would like to comply to ISO 27001, and penetration testing is part of the risk assessment process that it is inevitable. So we have to conduct the pen testing nowadays to meet the regulatory compliance. So what we don't know what we don't know, right? So always these statements actually catch my actually sticks with me for a long time. Always hack yourself first before the bad guys do it for you. So this is why we need to do penetration testing. So in collaboration with Alibaba Cloud LGMS, you can find our penetration testing services, vulnerability assessment services, PCI DSS advisory on Alibaba Cloud platform. At the same time, Alibaba Cloud is also providing many kind of security controls, effective security controls to protect organizations. For example, anti-DDoS, WAF security centers, etc. So you can find our details on the Alibaba Cloud Marketplace. And Jason, if you have anything to add about Alibaba service, please feel free to do so.
So I just want to highlight that. Thank you, Feng. So there's two point of views. One is LGMS pen test released as a premium solution on Alibaba Cloud Marketplace, and also on the other side, Alibaba Cloud, we also have a bunch of security services available in our international portal. So any potential risk or issues that can be identified in the penetration test, you can feel free to leverage our security solution like WAF or anti-DDoS to improve your security ability.
Thanks, thank you, Jason, and thank you, CF, as a whole a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of information there that you've passed through to everyone. Appreciate you laying it out so neatly. We do have some questions. I actually had a question myself, but I'll come on to that in a second. But I think a lot of customers interested in the report, the scorecard. So we've got one here, which is what does the security scorecard mean to me, and how can I improve the result? I suppose that's more about interpreting the results within the scorecard itself.
Yeah, security scorecard is, in fact, LGMS is collaborating with Cybersecurity Scorecard is to do this intelligence gathering. Security Scorecard is an organization by itself. It has one of the largest investors who come from digital data crawling and mining, and they're also a search engine that everyone knows. So basically, what we are doing in Cybersecurity Scorecard is we assess what the digital footprint an organization is emitting to the internet. For example, if your organization has suffered any kind of for example, we're looking at the publicly available data of your organization. If your organizations are hosting any websites and they are having some vulnerabilities on the website that was discovered by hackers and published in certain forums, these kind of intelligence are being captured and put together, aggregate, and then we can come up with a rating. So it's way easier if you can take a look at some sample scorecard that we can share with you, and then you get to know how are these information able to help you to improve yourself. So it's something that we are ready to share. So for anyone who registered for this webinar, then please get in touch with your Alibaba account manager then we can share the sample details scorecard report for you. And then from the scorecard report, you get to see how informations are being collected and how information can be used to improve your organizations.
Right, thanks, CF. And I think that almost leads on to the next question, which is just around the penetration test itself. This one says, can I perform penetration test by myself to comply with PCI DSS, or is it easier to use an external third-party service?
Yeah, that's a very good question. For PCI DSS, the standard itself only requires you to get someone who is competent to carry out the penetration testing for you. It didn't specify whether the competent party should be a third party, or it doesn't limit who can carry out the pen test either. So you can carry out the pen test by yourself as long as you can prove that the party who's carry out the pen test are technically competent. Now, of course, looking at a more objective point of view is that sometimes insiders may have certain information or certain details that can help to make the pen test more realistic and more relevant. But it's also good to explore using an outsider, a third party, someone who has no insight about your internal network, and get to see how the third party outsiders are able to discover something that they wouldn't know as compared with the insiders. It's also good to seek a balance between having an internal party and external party do it, and then from there you can get the best of both worlds.
Okay, great, thank you. One more here is about the difference. So what's the major difference between the white box and black box penetration test? If the white box test is performed, is it still necessary to run the black box one?
That's a good question. The difference between a white box and a black box testing is this. The black box testing, in the black box testing methodologies, the attackers or the testers do not have any inside knowledge about your network. Basically, it's just like we're testing something that we have no idea about, right? We do not know how the internal setup are configured. We have no idea how the internal mechanism works. So the question is that when we do a white box testing is in contrast. Basically, you are giving a lot of information to the testers, so the tester will, based on whatever information that's given, and carry out a more meaningful and more direct testing on the subject. For example, if you invite someone to do an internal penetration testing and you provide all the internal IP addresses, the server operating system version, you're providing the software version that you're currently using. So when you provide this kind of information to the testers, it saves the tester a lot of time, so the tester can be more focused and spend more time in discovering vulnerability rather than discovering this kind of information. So back to the question, if you engage someone to do a white box testing, I think it's safe to say that you no longer need a black box testing, because a white box testing typically will be far more comprehensive and far more detailed. And so the short answer is, if you conduct a white box testing, you no longer required to conduct a black box test.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, CF. A couple of other questions here. Just one around training, which is how much impact can end user training have for a business? You mentioned a phishing email plus malware is probably the best way for hackers to get in.
Yeah. Yes, training becomes a huge, major part of security defense nowadays, because we can invest so much into technologies, we can invest so much into our software, hardware, but the weakest link within an organization, and it's still kind of obvious, it's always the human. Human is always the weakest link. And sometimes there's a saying, we cannot patch carelessness, we cannot patch innocence. End users tend to be innocent and tend to be, sometimes we can't really trust our end users, unfortunately. So security awareness has become a major part of security defense nowadays. In fact, we find it more effective to educate end users on cybersecurity than spending so much money and resources into building up policies and procedures. I think it's end users educations. It should be a top priority for organizations nowadays.
One of those things, I suppose, there'll always be a human element to the vulnerability of any business. So yeah, it's a good point. And the last question here is just around the size of the business. So would you recommend penetration testing for smaller organizations, or is it only really relevant for the larger multinational corporations?
Okay, this is also a very good question, like common asked questions. Now, today, to hackers, to the bad guys, they don't care. You know, whether you are a small organization or whether you're large organizations, to the hackers, we are just an IP address. In fact, most of the work today, most of the attacks today on the internet are done by automated scanners, are not really the hackers. The automated scanners are built by hackers to do discovery, to do information collections, and to do exploitation. And once a device, once an IP address has been compromised, then only the human attackers will take over and proceed with the subsequent attacks. So meaning that nowadays, as long as we are on the internet, we are the targets. So penetration testing is no longer an exclusive activities that should be confined to SME or any other sectors. So everyone on the internet, as long as your organizations have an IP address on the net, you should be tested.
Right. Okay, thank you. So it's certainly lots to think about from the business owner's perspective, from the people in charge of the IT and the cybersecurity of organizations. So I think I'll just do one more quick check on the Q&A. That's clear, so nothing on there. I don't think anyone's dropped anything on the chat. So that's it, and we're kind of coming up to the hour mark. So thank you very much, CF. Really appreciate your time and certainly your insight into how penetration testing can be used for an organization to improve the security. And Jason, thank you for yourself. Just on a couple of housekeeping elements, as CF mentioned, we'll make the slides available to people. If you want to get in contact with me, please do so. My email address is on my screen here, but it's a.heading@alibaba-inc.com. And you can also get in contact with the LGMS guys at info@lgms.global. I think the reports certainly will be very interesting for people to have a look at, to see how their business fared and get some insight there. So if you're already talking to Alibaba Cloud or LGMS, then please feel free to have a chat to them. You can do that, or feel free to contact us on the email address on screen, or as I mentioned, mine as well. So hope you found the session interesting. And again, Jason and CF, thank you very much for your time, but we'll end the session here.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks, Jason.
Guys. Have a great day.
You
Thanks,
too.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.